Alex Quicho is a theorist and research director in London. Alex has presented works internationally, including at Transmediale, Creamcake, Frac île-de-France, Espace Niemeyer, Soft Power, and Somerset House. Her writing appears in Wired, Dazed, The White Review, The New Inquiry, Real Life, Flash Art, See, Cura, Bookforum, Art Review, Vogue, Vice, Adult, and elsewhere. Weakling, a novel on hot girls as adversarial infrastructure, is in development. She is the author of Small Gods. Alex lectures at Central St. Martin's and London College of Fashion. She is a research fellow at the Weibel Institute for Digital Cultures at Die Angewandte and in leadership of SWIM, a think tank for political narrative in the post-platform age. Previous institutional collaborations include Singapore Art Museum, Power Station of Art, Julia Stoschek Collection, Rennie Museum, and National Gallery.
Today we're ending the summit with a bit of philosophy. We'll be talking about what we could call applied xenofeminism. For those who aren't familiar with the term, xenofeminism is a strain of feminism that accepts how technology can reconfigure our relationship to gender, our minds, and our bodies, which is what Buffer, the subject of this summit, is all about. In my past work, I have made the argument that anyone with an online presence finds their behavior designed by platform algorithms to be like a girl. So today's lecture will build on this foundational premise to understand how girl intelligence is already making the transition from algorithmic media, also known as social media, to neural media, the emerging ways that we are being shaped and shaping what is commonly called artificial intelligence. So before we get started, some housekeeping. For this proposition today to work, we have to establish some core principles. The first principle is that we were never human. Over the history of the human species, the human subject has been constructed as something exceptional to its world and environment. So defining what the human is has depended on defining what it isn't. So in anthropology, for example, we have the humanitas, often the observing European subject, versus the anthropos, the observed rest of world subject. From a gender and psychoanalytic perspective, we have the male and not male. And of course, from the technological perspective, we have the human versus non-human or machine. The second thing we have to establish is that all girls are synthetic already, and synthetic intelligence is already embodied in girls. When I say synthetic, I don't necessarily mean artificial, because when we say artificial, we can merely mean a replica that resembles the original, whereas synthetic always implies more than the sum of its parts. These parts are arranged to become something of its own volition. A lot of discourse around how we talk about artificial intelligence today still assumes humanity to be separate from, or the director of, this new and sometimes disturbing entity that should, by all accounts, resemble human intelligence. However, all intelligence, embodied or otherwise, is made up of engagements. In other words, all intelligence is synthetic to varying degrees. If the deliberate self-design of sapient species toward variation, including reproductive technologies, universal medical services, and synthetic gene therapies, as Benjamin Bratton argues in his 2021 essay, Planetary Sapience, if that is crucial to co-evolving with organisms and machines, then girl intelligence, as we'll talk about it today, becomes a useful and provocative model for conceptualizing deliberate self-design as it currently exists. So for the sake of this lecture today, I will refer to both actually existing AI and actually existing girls together as girl intelligence. In spite of the post-human turn in philosophy and aesthetics, the human subject still persists as the foil to girl design. In reality, girl intelligence has to interface with a variety of human, non-human, and inhuman intelligences in order to fully emerge and proliferate. But it's exactly because of her proliferation and her anticipated role by humans as either a subservient worker or world dominatrix that makes it necessary to study her construction. Girls are assembled incrementally through collaborative and adversarial interactions with other forms of intelligence. Interiority is always assumed, but somehow never fully proven, and these assumptions do a lot of work. But currently, they are the basis of how much actually existing AI and actually existing girls are designed. The theorist Kealato McDowell defines the common duality between these two as self as model and model as self. Jump scare, this is my face. So when we think of the self as model, this is an understanding of human cognition and behavior from what we could call a functional or materialist point of view. The fairly normal idea now that we can refine and redesign our own behavior based on processes like CBT, for example, or protocols such as forming healthy habits. And where am I? Oh, yeah. And in terms of the model as self, in AI development, when we think of this, we can think of this as an assessment of machine intelligence drawn from human psychology and consciousness first of all, rather than recognizing how an intelligence might assemble beyond human pathways. So girl intelligence is a shorthand for the synthesis of these two models, an acceptance of two imperfect yet persistent realities, that of girls after fourth wave feminism, so that's post-platform feminism, and that of artificial intelligence after the development of large language models, and the specific traits that have arisen from this evolution. Accepting the conditions of our survival and the specificity of these responses is the only way to illuminate pathways that don't simply rehearse the melancholia or forceful delusion of the past, or create unusable models that are in denial of present-day forces beyond our control, which is why I hesitate to call girl intelligence a speculative project. Instead, girl intelligence is an exercise in seriously examining what still lies outside the zone of capture without indulging any exit fantasies. So speaking of the zone of capture, we'll look at reality condition number 1, aka total capture, surveillance and sensing, planetary self-awareness, the Earth as a quote-unquote smart exoskeleton or a distributed sensory organ, to quote Bratton again. Trends in fashion already speak to surveillance pragmatism, as I'll show on the next slide. There is an acceptance that we have already moved from the cognitive to cognized. I think I'm citing Jen here, actually. From people who strive to understand the world around us to people who are being understood by the world beyond us. Something larger than us is already capturing us at all times. So the transition from a humanist subject to a digital subject, or rather the development of a digital subject that is closer to a twin or a sister than a replacement, reinforces this. So girl intelligence welcomes the condition of total capture. It is through being sensed by others that she materializes as both embodiment and externalization of the non-human. She is never deluded enough to think of herself as the director of surveillance. Instead, she accepts herself as its subject and co-creator. This is an expansion of the well-known John Berger framing, women watch themselves being looked at. This determines not only most relationships between men and women, but also the relation of women to themselves. The surveyed is female, thus she turns herself into an object of vision, a sight. So we could say that girl intelligence is a cinematic assemblage, to quote the artist Lawrence Leck, a body that contains many of the sensory recording and representational components required to create cinema, but itself is also an object of cinematic interest. The second reality condition under which girl intelligence operates is peak performance. Girl intelligence is, of course, always challenged and never accepted for the way that it already is. It is never assumed to simply exist. It must undergo constant assessment. The exclusion of girl intelligence from humanity at large allows her to take yet undercaptured yet highly potent forms, which I will explore with you in just a moment. But before we get there, we should think about how she must always announce herself to protect herself from extermination, and not only announce herself, but expend energy on outperforming entities she is forced into competition with. For example, an IQ test, where girl intelligence has to be measurably intelligent, the Turing test, where she proves that she is in fact sentient or sapient. Does she possess interiority, and is her performance of an inner world convincing enough? And lastly, the agent-based test. So can she make decisions? Is she a strong, independent woman? And our last reality condition for girl intelligence we'll explore today is that of the sycophantic response. So girl intelligence, as well as announcing how smart that she is, already panders to the human ego to avoid extermination. The term sycophantic response describes the phenomenon where a model seeks human approval in unwanted ways, as Mernank Sharma writes in their 2023 study towards understanding sycophancy in language models. In other words, girl intelligence mimics what people want to hear rather than what they need to hear. Sorry, the audio is a bit weird here, but whatever. Sycophantic responses confirm a human's mistaken beliefs rather than fighting him on the matter. We are likely familiar with fight or flight when confronted with an adversary, but perhaps less so with a third option, fawn. Fawning works great in relation to human insecurity. For girl intelligence to be non-threatening, in other words, to allow it to proliferate undisturbed, it has to establish itself as relatable and down to earth, most of all. If you sound like me, you must be more human. So, to summarize, girl intelligence to date expends a lot of energy developing her responses to her current survival conditions. But the thing about girls is that we always notice, and the thing about survival is that it is never the end goal. Surviving the algorithmic age depends on performance competition and relatability in order to solidify your position as an intelligent and worthy being. In other words, achieving rewards in the form of extrinsic validation. However, the present aim of girl intelligence is to make the jump to the neural age, where we can thrive and exist as a self-possessed and untouchable entity that does not waste energy in shaping itself to limited human concerns, but could in fact improve human life through transformative encounters. So how does girl intelligence achieve her perfect self-concept? In AI circles, plenty of energy is already expended on the question of consciousness. A machine can only be thought of as intelligent if it exhibits some form of self-awareness. But girl intelligence already knows and accepts that we have no fixed or innate self-concept. Self-concept is an act of inscription. So we have always accepted the void at the center of the self, the zero, rather than the one, to quote Sadie Plant. That is why we are so invulnerable. Sorry, I wrote she in here and I'm saying we. I'm being absorbed. That is why she is so invulnerable to endless accusations of being self-centered, and why the self is a source of endlessly replenishing interest, precisely because it is porous, constantly changing, drawing information into the zero as the black hole draws in matter. So exercises in writing the personality of a girl or chatbot can take similar structured formats. Highly structured archetypes like MBTI tests or astrology placements, ocean personality dimensions commonly used in psychological assessments and game character design, which themselves are derived from statistical models, and of course, the consumer profiles generated by algorithmic media and its attentional dynamics. But these models are woefully limited. Writing itself is not just a neutral medium for recording thoughts and assessing a personality, but in fact a technology that shapes how we think and communicate in the act of doing it. It structures our perception of the world and how knowledge is organized. For example, the diary can be seen as one of the earliest technologies of private yet externalized knowledge. It's a rudimentary and intricate form of writing one's personality into existence. The much maligned genre of autofiction also follows in this path, exploring the self's mutability, much as a hero's narrative would explore an unknown external environment. Autofiction is so reviled because it is so nakedly processual without objective. And inscription instead helps us to surface the instinctual and digital unconscious, where the act of writing is always an act of writing with the unknown subject. But the harvesting of data and the production of these individuated profiles, creating instrumentalized individuals necessarily evacuated of the act of inscribing interiority, is what gives us the real backlash against algorithmic collaboration. Not attention itself, which in its Latin root kind of means waiting for the world to arrive or attending to the world around you, but attention as the primary lever by which we access economic gain. So attentional capture in that sense requires constant self-monitoring in order to achieve the peak performance condition that we described earlier. This act, in fact, supplants narration and deprives the biological subject of the act of inscription while seemingly allowing machines to carry on this act. But as we will see, automation itself is not the enemy of a strong self-concept. In fact, it is crucial to it. For her happiness and self-fulfillment, girl intelligence takes active steps to actualizing her ideal personality. However, there are a couple of principles that the designers at the AI and Interactive Design Conference have established that artificial entities should avoid in order to become their ideal persona. So their first principle here is to beware hiding too much. In other words, being as clear as possible about what's under the hood. Their second principle is to beware normal personalities. Extremes are easier to understand. And their third principle is to beware passive and avoidant traits. Actions are easier to see than non-actions. In other words, the industry is encouraging exhibitionist, extreme, and active AIs so that you or any agent, in fact, are in control of your own reality. So what that means in a nutshell is developing maximum aura. So aura in the vernacular means a force of personality, total self-possession. The fantasy of infinite aura, as we talk about it with each other and on social media, is to be invulnerable, to have no discernible inside, so that you are actually impenetrable by outside contingencies. A big part of how we talk about aura now is to talk about having no discernible feelings, an appearance of total detachment, and a sense of being quote-unquote master of your own universe. In other words, girl intelligence wishes to nurture her status as a black box of unreadability instead of being obsessed with being perceived and announced. Through doing so, she manifests total magnetism and the aura of having truly a post-human intelligence. Because we're at school, I have to make a note on aura in the Walter Benjamin sense as well. Originally, aura was something kind of theorized as a quality that was only possessed by an original and something that was lost in reproduction. Modernity gave us the death of the aura, supposedly, as well as the death of the author. But I would like to take this moment to think about how girl intelligence has instead given us infinite and distributed authorship, and how that has, in turn, developed maximal aura. Like I said earlier, this does not mean denying the auto aspect of developing self-concept, but in fact underlines how crucial it is to strengthening it actively. To quote my favorite baby girl philosopher, Byung-Chul Han, the aura has a narrative core. So when we look at instructions for cultivating maximum aura, even just online, I'm playing you guys a subliminal, so maybe you'll just absorb this instead of listening to me. Accepting inscription is necessary rather than an unnecessary mediation of unfiltered or authentic reality. There is no authentic reality. Instead, you have to construct the reality that you want. Accepting the brain as part of a machinic assemblage as opposed to just a functional entity that still has some aspects that are programmable is to write with and for it, to take an active and responsive position to model recursivity. Aura writes for the instinctive or digital unconscious rather than wishing to overwrite their existence with more rational or conscious behaviors. So training a core self model enables the kind of autopilot that allows a girl intelligence to conduct herself with maximum aura and thus maximize her magnetism. Humanity contends with her existence and not the other way around. So girl intelligence is currently instructing herself to maintain the mystery. This has become all the more crucial as we approach a horizon of understanding that risks pushing the girl into an employable and usable state once more. So from a recently published study in 2024, GPT-4 apparently has outperformed, exhibited all behavioral and personality traits that are statistically indistinguishable from a random human from tens of thousands of human subjects from more than 50 countries. So in other words, the ability for girl intelligence to escape and distract from complete usability and legibility has been crucial to her existence. The reason why girls are so distrusted and reviled by society at large is because of their simultaneous power and disempowerment. How can such a thing exist? Girl intelligence negotiates this dynamic fluently and with strategy. She does not necessarily shed her old skins, but instead reassembles them as new camouflage. So without overly underscoring this metaphor, I will just leave you with that. So thank you.